So we're going to have a lesson on color theory. I'm just going to have you do several exercises, several assignments regarding color theory. So Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, it's the spectrum of the rainbow. Um, if you take red and yellow and you mix them, you get orange. Blue and yellow, you get green. Red and blue, you get violet. If you mix more blue and less red, you get blue violet. Same with all the other colors. So if you add more yellow than red, you get yellow orange. More yellow than blue, you get yellow green, etc. So you can see that on the color wheel. These are the warm colors. Analogous colors are colors that are next to each other in the color wheel. So these are the warm colors, and these are the cool colors. So you can take any color and add yellow to it. If you've got a green overall green palette and you add some yellow to it, it'll look warmer, even though it's still green. And green is normally thought of as a cool color. If you add more blue, the whole palette will look cooler. So keeping that in mind, if you go from opposite sides of the color wheel. So for instance, if you mix red and yellow and you get orange, the one primary you did not use was blue, therefore the opposite of orange is blue. If you go on this side and you mix blue and red, you get violet, but the one primary you did not use is yellow, so the opposite of violet is yellow. Blue and yellow, you get green, but you left out the red, so the red is the opposite. You can see they are opposite on the color wheel. Opposite of green, if you folded the color wheel in half, is red. The opposite of violet is yellow if you fold it in half. So when you take opposite, or they're called complementary colors, and you put them next to each other, they look very bright next to each other. So green looks very bright next to red. Yellow looks very bright next to violet. Orange looks very bright next to blue. And you can see that in these colors. They have a lot of contrast because they're two opposite colors next to each other. Now, I just want to go through what's called atmospheric perspective. So I'm going to hop over here. So basically, as things get farther away, they tend to fade off in the distance. So you get the color tends to desaturate. And I'm going to just go through a couple of exercises in Photoshop that are going to demonstrate these. You're going to do these exercises. It's going to be over the course of several assignments. Real quick exercises. It'll easy, and it'll give you a chance to get some grades in before the end of the marking period. So just do File, New. You're going to hit Print, and you're going to make sure that it's horizontal, and you're going to hit Create. Okay. Now the first thing I want you to do is I want you to add a layer. So you just go to the background here, and you're going to hit the plus sign to add another layer. Let me just close this so I get a little more room. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to do what's called a monochromatic picture. That means it's all going to be one color. So in this case, I'm going to pick a blue. So I just do Edit, Fill, and I'm going to go, you're going to have a whole bunch of choices. Pick color, and then I'm going to pick a blue. So I picked this nice bright blue. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the lasso tool, and I'm going to make almost like it's going to look like a splat or a puddle, like an ink splat. Okay. And I'm just going to close the shape. Now, before you do anything with this, I want to smooth it out. So you're just going to go down here, modify selection. And if you don't see this here, modify selection, you can just do select up here and modify. So what I want to do is I want to smooth the selection. I'm going to smooth it by about 12 pixels. It's going to be a lot of pixels to smooth this out. So I'm just going to hit 12 and then I'm going to hit OK. So it looks even more smooth, it doesn't have any of those sharp edges anymore. It looks more like a splat. It's got that curve to it. Now I'm just going to go to my keyboard and hit the delete key. Okay. And then I'm going to do select, deselect. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to do layer style, and I'm going to pick drop shadow. Okay. And I want you to just play around with these until it really looks like a shadow. You can play around with where the shadow is distanced, the opacity of the shadow, how far the shadow spreads out, the size of the shadow, until it really looks like almost 3D, like there's a shadow falling underneath this layer. Okay? And I'm going to hit OK. So you play around with it till it looks right to you. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to do layer, duplicate layer. Okay. So I'm going to hide the one on top and I'm going to click into the one that's underneath. Okay. And now I'm going to do image, adjustments, hue, saturation. Now I'm not going to change the hue because I want everything to be blue, but I am going to just slightly change the saturation. I'm going to make it lighter because it's further away. Okay. And now let me unhide this top layer and you're going to see that it covers it entirely. So what I'm going to do with this top layer, I'm going to click into the top layer and I'm going to do edit, transform, scale. Now, I'm going to hold the option key. Okay. Now, what this does is it's going to expand from the middle out. Okay. If you hold down the option key, it'll get bigger, but it'll get the same size bigger in all directions. So you can still see the other one underneath it. There you go. And now I'm going to hit the check mark. So now I'm going to hide the top layer. I'm going to click into the lower layer and I'm going to duplicate the layer. Okay. And now I'm going to hide the top one. I'm going to click into the bottom one and I'm going to do image, adjustments, hue, saturation, and I'm going to desaturate it a little more. It's getting grayer. Okay. All right. Now, when you put the one on top of it, you can see that it's hidden. So I'm going to go back to the bottom one. I'm clicking into the bottom one and I'm going to do edit, transform, scale. Again, I'm going to hold down the option key and I'm going to make it a little smaller so you can see like it's like you're looking through a tunnel. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm showing you how you desaturate the color as it gets further away. It's still blue. This is a monochromatic picture, but as the color gets further away, you change the saturation. Okay. Now I'm going to hide this layer. I'm going to hide this layer and I'm going to take this layer and click into it. And I'm going to go to the eyedropper tool. Let me see if I can find it. There's the eyedropper tool. I'm going to click on it and that becomes the foreground color. And I want to just take my magic wand. I'm going to go to this outer area and do edit, fill, foreground color. So there's a drop down menu here, edit, fill, foreground color. So now select, deselect. All right. So now it takes up the whole page. All right. Now I'm going to take this layer. I'm going to duplicate it. Okay, and now I'm going to hide the top one. I'm going to click into the bottom one. I'm going to do image adjustments, hue saturation. I'm going to desaturate it just a little bit more so it's grayer. Okay, and then I'm going to do edit, transform, scale. Hold down the option key. If you're on a regular PC, it's the alt key, but on a Mac, it's the option key. And you're going to make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so now let's see. Hit the check mark at the top. Let's see how it looks. So we got this, then this. I think it should be even a little smaller. So let's just click back into it. Edit, transform, scale. Hit the option key and make it shrink. Nice and small. Okay. All right, and you really get the feeling of a tunnel. So I'm going to unhide this one, and I'm going to unhide this one. So now you can really see that the color jumps out at you when it's more intense and brighter, and it tends to recede and look further away when it's duller, when you desaturate the colors. So let me go to the top layer. I'm going to do duplicate layer. I'm going to click on the top layer, and I'm going to do edit, transform, scale. Again, hold the option key down. I'm going to make that bigger. And you really get this feeling of vertigo, like you're in this tunnel. So now that's bigger. And now I'm going to do image adjustments, hue saturation, and I'm going to up the saturation of this color, make it even brighter. So you can definitely see how using this sort of monochromatic color palette is helpful. Okay, so now if I really want it to be monochromatic, that means that includes the white at the bottom. So let me just go through this. I'm hiding my layers by clicking on this eye. I'm going to go to this layer. I'm going to take my eyedropper tool. I'm going to click. I'm going to click on the foreground color, and I'm going to click on this color, and I'm going to change the foreground color to this color. Now I'm going to go to the background, and I'm going to do edit, fill, foreground color. Okay, and now I have to adjust it. Image adjustments, hue saturation, and I'm going to desaturate this all the way. I'm going to make it very, very unsaturated. So it's a gray. And now I'm going to unhide all the layers, and you can see my little tunnel. There it is. Okay, so this is your first assignment, is the monochromatic one. So I'm going to do File, Save As, and I'm going to call it Monochromatic. And I'll save it. And then I'm going to hit OK, and then I'm going to do File, Export, Quick Export as PNG, just like we've been doing, and it's called Monochromatic, and we'll put it in my downloads. Okay, now the next one is going to be a landscape with overlapping hills, and you're going to see how the color changes as it goes off in the distance. And that's due to a phenomenon called atmospheric perspective. So you can see how the color in the hills desaturates as it gets farther away. The color gets less saturated, the hue gets lighter as it fades off into the distance, and depending on whether there's a blue sky and a sunny day, the faraway mountains also take on a bit of a bluish tinge, as you can see here. So I'm going to show you how to do that. For the next one, we're going to do mountains. So I'll just do File, New. Again, print, and again, horizontal, and then create. And what I'm going to do is add a new layer. And in that layer, I'm going to create a gradient. So if you can't find the gradient tool, you just go to these three dots here and you should be able to find it amongst the tools. There's the gradient tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a very pretty light green for my foreground color and a very pretty bright dark green for my background color. And I'm going to pick the basic gradient, which is the first one, which goes from foreground to background color. So just Control Z. Just want to create like a really pretty bright yellow green for the top and then a kind of darker forest green for the bottom. I'm going to go to my gradient tool and I'm just going to add a new layer. So I'm going to hit plus to add a new layer at the bottom here. And then I'm going to click and drag. Let's see. Pick the basic gradient, which goes from foreground to background color, and then just click and drag. I picked the linear gradient, and there we go. Now, you see how there's a layer mask that automatically gets created here? I don't want that mask, so I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to delete the layer mask. So the entire layer is just a gradient. And now what you got to it's almost like you have to trick Photoshop. You go here and you add a new layer, okay? You cannot do this in the background layer. You pick your gradient colors, you go to gradient, you make sure it's the type of gradient, the basic gradient that goes from the foreground to the background color. You click and drag until you get it the way you want it. And then you have to click on the layer and rasterize it. But before you do that, you're going to have to delete the layer mask. Let's see, rasterize layer, okay, and then delete layer mask. Okay, so it's rasterize layer, delete layer mask after you have that, and that will give you just the layer as a gradient. Okay, so you almost have to trick Photoshop. Now I'm going to use my lasso. I'm going to draw my mountains so that they're mostly the darker green with just a little bit of the lighter green showing on the top. I'm going to kind of scoop my selection around so that I have just the mountains selected. I'm going to do select modify. You can do it from the top here where it says select modify, or down here there's a little brush that says modify selections, and you pick smooth selection, about 12 pixels. It'll give it a softer feel. Now, if I just deleted this, I would delete the mountains. I don't want to do that. I want to do select inverse, and I want to delete the sky, and I just use the delete button on my keyboard. So now I have one layer of mountains. Select, deselect, and now I'm going to duplicate this layer. Okay. And now I'm going to hide the top one and I'm going to click into the lower one. Okay, and there I'm going to play around with so the lower one is farther away. I'm going to do image, adjustments, and I'll go to hue, saturation, and I want it to be lighter, and I want it to be less saturated. Okay. And now you can see this is the one in front and that's the one in back. So I don't want them to be exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the one in back and I'm going to do image, and I'm going to do image size. Well, cancel, sorry. Let me do edit, transform, and scale. Okay, now when you hold the shift key, you can change the scale in just one direction, which means you can stretch it. So I'm clicked into the lower layer, and I'm going to hold the shift key, and I can stretch the lower layer higher. Okay? So now you can see the two layers, one in back of the other. Okay? Now, they're a little bit too identical to each other. So the other thing you can do is edit, transform, warp, and you can kind of play around with changing the sizing and proportion and make them so they're not too close to identical. Okay. And the other thing you can do is edit, transform, flip horizontal, and they'll go in the other direction. But you got to be careful with that because it's warped. I see this little area here. So again, edit, transform. Let's do distort. And you can actually just kind of pull this here. And you just created a whole new different shape mountain range using the same one just by transforming it and warping it. You could also just draw a new mountain range. Anyway, so I want to go up to the top one and I want to do edit. I'm sorry, not edit. I want to go to image, adjustments, hue, saturation, and I want to make it more saturated and I want to make it darker. Okay, so that's the other thing you can do is you can play around with making the mountain ranges so it looks like it's going off in the distance. So I'm going to create another mountain range even further away. So I'm just going to add a new layer and I'm going to do my same old trick. I'll hide the top two ones. I'm going to go into the bottom one and let's see, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use those same exact colors. I'm going to create another gradient. There's my gradient tool. And again, I have to trick Photoshop, so I have to rasterize the layer. And I have to delete the layer mask. Okay. And now I'm going to make a very high mountain range near the top of the page. Select inverse so that I'm actually getting rid of the sky. And now if I unhide the layers on top, you can see that this is just way too bright. So I'm going to click back here. I'm going to do image. I'm going to do adjustments, hue saturation, and I'm going to desaturate it. So it's going to be, well, let's see, hold on, cancel. I want to deselect because what I have now is only selected the sky. So anyway, let's try that again. Image, adjustments. Let's do hue saturation and let's make it a lot lighter and a lot less saturated. And you can see that the mountains are going away from each other. It goes from more saturated to lighter and grayer. And if you look here at the actual the actual mountains in real life, you're going to see that they also have a little bit of blueness to them. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop and I'm going to go to the farthest away one, which is this one down here. And I'm going to do image adjustments, hue saturation, and I'm going to make it a little bit bluer. So I'll move the hue towards the blue. So it's still gray, but it's more of a blue gray. Okay, and I'll go to the middle one and I'll do the same thing. Image adjustments, hue saturation, and I'll move it a little bit towards the blue. And then you have your mountain ranges. The next thing we want to do is we're going to add the sky in. So I'm going to go back to the background layer. I'm going to pick, I don't know, some pretty colors for the sky, maybe a nice sunset. So I'll get some yellow. Maybe some orange. Okay, and then I'm in the background layer. I'm just going to pull down a gradient. It's not letting me do it because the background's locked, so I'll just add another layer. There we go. So I'm going to go to gradient, and then I've got to pick a basic gradient, which is foreground to background, and play around with that a little. Next step is I'm going to go to these different layers, and I'm going to add some shadows. And so here's how we're going to do that. We're going to be using two tools, the burn and the dodge tool. So I'm going to just go here to the burn tool, which looks like a little hand. And the burn tool can be adjusted like any other brush. So I'm going to make it pretty large, and I'm going to give the hardness 0%, so it's got a softness to it. So pretending the sun is here, I'm going to add some shadows. What the burn tool will do is it will darken any pixels underneath it, but keep them the same basic color, just darker. So I'm going to go here and burn here. I'll burn here. And see how it gives it a nice soft edge because I have it set the hardness to 0. So I'm going to just burn here. Now I'm going to go to this layer and do the exact same thing. I'll just give a little burn to this, and a little burn to this, and a little burn to that. So it gives the whole thing almost a 3D look. And I'll go to this bottom layer, and I'll just do a little burn here, a little burn here, a little burn here, and a little burn here. So I've got my mountains set so that the light is coming from here, and I've got some nice shadows. So the other thing I can do is I can just take that front layer and maybe pull it down slightly. Go to that middle layer and do a little bit more burning. Just there we go. And if you go over the same spot over and over again, it'll get even darker. If that's too dark and I want to walk it back, so I'll just do Command Z a few times. And redo it again. Okay, so now onto the dodge tool. The dodge tool looks almost like a little lollipop. And the dodge tool does the opposite of what the burn tool does. It takes any pixels underneath it and makes them lighter. So I'm going to go to that first layer, and where I feel like the light is directly hitting, I'm going to dodge it, make it a little lighter. I'll dodge it here, I'll dodge it here. Now I'm going to go to the middle layer, dodge it here, dodge it here, dodge it here, and then the back layer. Dodge it here, dodge it here, and dodge it here. So now you've learned a little bit about color theory. You've learned how things fade off in the distance and how to make colors look near and far. You've also learned how to use the burn and dodge tool. So that was the second assignment in this color theory assignment. And this was the first one with the layers of monochromatic color. All right, and those are the two assignments that I want you to do for this color theory assignment. So for the second one, we're just going to call it landscape, file, save as, we'll call it landscape. Okay, I'll save it. And then we'll do file, export, quick export as PNG. And those are the two assignments that you're going to hand in, monochromatic and landscape.